it's going to be better than another, or exactly how much light they're going to put out that'll be good for the plants. But I'm sure that'll be out in the research literature pretty soon, and we'll certainly let you know about it as we learn more about it.
What about LEDs?
LEDs don't put out much blue light. And you know, they're such a low energy bulb. They're such a good thing energy-wise, but they're not going to do a whole lot. LEDs probably the wave of the future, but at least in some areas. But they are expensive. They'll pay for themselves, but I think we're looking at $35, $40 for a light bulb now. And did everybody hear about all the problems this winter with the LED bulbs and the light signals? They actually had some very serious problems, including some people that died as a result of it. But something that nobody thought about, you know, several cities in the Northeast through the Midwest decided we're going to be really green, and on our traffic signals, we're going to use LED bulbs in them. Real good for the energy purposes, but guess what? They produce no heat whatsoever. They totally cased over with ice and snow, and people couldn't see the traffic lights, and they had a lot of very, very serious traffic accidents as a result. So you got to think before you use all these things, but I'm serious, it was a real problem. The fact they didn't produce any heat, they had a terrible problem with them getting covered with snow and ice, and some very serious situations resulted from it. But LEDs are good, but they'll be good in the right place, and they won't be good in your plant lights unless they change them substantially. Yes?
Where do grow lights fall into that?
Grow lights are the ultimate as far as putting out the largest amount of light in the blue end of the spectrum. The problem with the grow lights, though, is that they cost about 5 times as much as the daylight white, and they're not 500% better. Now, the other thing to know about fluorescent bulbs, and again, the jury's still out on your little compact fluorescents, but the bulbs break down over a period of time. What we call the spectral output breaks down over a period of time. They still look the same to our eye, but the first part of the spectrum that the bulb stops producing is the blue end of the spectrum, the end that benefits the plants. If you're going to rely on artificial light to help out your plants, and if you're putting fluorescent lights of any sort in, switch them out about every 6 months. They'll last on average about 2 years. But if you've got a part of your home where you're using these things for your plants and a part where you're not, keep putting fresh ones in about every 6 months where your plants are if you want your plants to get the maximum benefit from it. Now, I always get the question too, well, how much light can they take? How long should we leave the lights on if we're going to rely on artificial light? Houseplants really don't care how long or short the days are. Day length can influence flowering in plants, but once again, nobody wants their Chinese evergreen or their Dracaena or their palm or whatever to flower. So actually, the longer the better. And plants do not have to have a resting time. They don't have to have a period of dark. The reason I know this is because another of the companies that we put plants in for up in Dallas was Steak and Ale's home office, and they left their lights on 24 hours a day and worked rotating shifts in that office. And the plants grew like weeds. The plants were growing faster in their office than they were in our greenhouses. And we had the plants leased to them, and it's a great thing. You put this little plant in there, a year later, the plant's gotten too big for the spot, and you know, gosh, you know, we're sorry, we'll have to take this big plant out and put another smaller plant back in. Had a hippie work for me at the time named John Weiss. Hadn't thought about him in a long time. But one of the few really intelligent things John ever said was, you know, this is such a deal. We've got these people paying us to let us use their office for our greenhouse. I think that's the most complex thought he ever had. But oh, I have to tell you one other funny thing. I'm sure there are a few musically inclined people in here, but in the world of science, when we're going to look at something under the microscope, you have to cut very thin sections of it. And you frequently use an instrument known as a microtome that will cut extremely thin sections of a piece of tissue, and then you can put it under a microscope. Just thinking about this one person, we were experiencing, I don't know, some kind of a little bit of disease problem or something in some of the plants, and he came into me, and with a very serious face one time, he said, you know, we need to really analyze this problem. We need to get us a microscope, and we need to get us a metronome so we can cut really thin sections and look at it under the microscope. And just looked at it and said, are we going to cut them in 2-2 or 4-4 times? And he never did figure out what I was talking about. But anyway, artificial light does work if you need to supplement light for your plants. But the best bet is still putting them where they get a reasonable amount of daylight, reasonable amount of sunlight. You know, even a place like the sun that's shining through the window there are a lot of plants that would be happy in that amount of light. The other thing to remember, though, is that light is quantitative. Having a moderately bright place where it's moderately bright all day long is better than having a place that's really bright for an hour a day. Think about the total amount of light that that particular spot is going to receive throughout the day, and that will help you make your decision as to what kind of plant is going to grow best in that particular area. Their plants will grow in lower light, their plants will grow in moderate light, their plants will grow in very bright light, and it's very important to know which is which. It's also there's some things to know about buying plants that we'll talk about in just a second. But we always have people that want to grow plants in areas that I would call not low light, but no light places. And there is one way that you can be very successful growing a green plant. There are plants that grow in the dark, like mildew and mold and various kinds of fungus, but the green plants that we want to have, nothing thrives in a no light area. In fact, nothing stays alive for very long in a no light area. So if you really have a dark area that you would like to have a green plant, whatever you get 2 of them. Leave one of them in the bright area, one of them in the dark area, and switch them once a week. If you'll be very faithful about doing that, both of them will stay looking good for a long period of time. But do not wait until they start looking bad to move them, because the way a plant looks at any given time is a reflection of the care that it got about 5 or 6 weeks ago. And if you leave a plant in a place until it looks bad, it's going to take it a long time to start looking better. So if you have areas where the light is really minimal, like I say, get a plant that grows with lower light, but get 2 of them and swap them, leaving one of them out in the brighter place, one of them in the darker place, and just every Monday morning or every Sunday morning or whatever, pick a day of the week and switch the 2 plants around, and you'll grow them very successfully that way. Now, again, most people go about choosing a house plant in exactly the wrong way. They go out and they find a plant they like, and then they take it home and look for a place to put it. Probably 80% of the time, they don't have a real good place for it. So the way you should buy a house plant is to look at the place that you want to grow the plant, and then go out and buy a plant that will grow in that amount of light. And, you know, do a little bit of homework, figure out how much light the area gets, you know, before you go looking for the plant. Again, having talked to so many garden clubs and so many people over the years, I'll never forget, you know, one person that was wanting to buy, I think it was a Ficus benjamina or something like that, which is a very bright light plant. And I asked this young lady how much light the plant got, and well, she just couldn't figure it out. I said, okay, well, what direction does the window face? And you know, it's a funny thing, you ask somebody what direction the window faces or what direction the house faces, they start turning around. They do this, and then they end up, they point due north and tell you the window faces south. And you never know whether to believe them or not. And we went through all that. She turned around about 6 times, still couldn't figure out what direction the window faced. And I finally said, well, you know, does the sun come in there in the morning or in the afternoon? And she said, well, the sun's always shining in that window when I get up. And I thought, oh, an east window. And she said, but I never get up till about 1 or so. So after going through all of this, we figured out it was a west window, which was pretty bright. And I think her ficus did well for quite a long time. Someday I'll write a book about the things I've heard. I love the person. And one time I said, what direction does your house face, trying to figure this out? She says, well, to the front, of course.
Hey, Bob, you better write that book before you get too much older.
I haven't heard enough yet. I'm still collecting material.
Remember them, though.
Yeah. Remember what? Yeah. But anyway, it's figuring out how much light the area gets is really critically important. Really, probably much more so than watering or any other sorts of problems. So look at the area, see how much light it gets, and then you can figure out, what kind of plant will grow there best. Now, in just a few minutes, we're going to talk about a bunch of different